Welcome to the Blissful Life, a podcast where we awaken the wisdom of self and explore the lessons, the rituals, and the pathways to inner bliss. I'm your host, Regina Lawless, former corporate executive turned author and spiritual teacher. And I'm on a mission, y'all, to help people connect to and express their divine self so they can make their unique impact on the world. If you've been feeling like there is more to life than the hustle and grind, then you found your tribe. It's time to breathe and relax into the blissful life. Welcome back to the Blissful Life. I am so delighted to have my next guest. Lynne Walker is someone that I consider a friend and a cherished mentor. I cannot wait for y'all to hear her story. Lynne Walker is the founder and managing member of Connect Consulting, LLC. Prior to forming the company, Lynne had an extensive career in senior and executive leadership roles in corporate, commercial and treasury banking, achieving success leading high-impact profit centers or P&Ls, major banking institutions, including Wachovia, which is now Wells Fargo, First Citizens, and First Horizon. During her career, she also created and led a revenue strategy which provided access to capital and business acumen for women, minorities, and small businesses. I am so delighted. Welcome to the show, Lynne.
Thank you. And I can't believe you're calling me a mentor because I look up to you too for everything you've accomplished. So I'm excited to be here. And I want to say thank you to your great audience and followers for even spending time with us today.
Oh my gosh, right? Like that's what keeps us going. And just guests like you. And so to give the audience some context of how we met, it was through a mutual friend. So back in the day, this had to be like more than 10 years ago, probably closer to 15 years ago, I worked for Bank of the West. And my goodness, I look back on that. I feel like that was a whole other lifetime.
So you were a boring banker too, huh?
Yes, I was. Yes. And what's funny when you say boring banker, I was bored to tears. And no shade on the banking industry. I just think I was in a role where I was being underutilized at the time. So I could have probably fallen asleep at my cubicle. I was so bored. But it was great experience overall. I was leading this program and I met this beautiful colleague, Amy Beninato, who after I'd left the bank, Amy and and shout out to Amy, she's lovely. We stayed in contact and on LinkedIn, she had reached out and she was like, hey, I got someone that you should meet. I think you'll have something in common. And of course, she directed me to you.
So I'm going to add a little bit to that because I don't know if she sent the email or the LinkedIn message to you or to me first. I think it was probably you.
I think so.
Because once you agreed, then she contacted me, and Amy, actually, I knew her partner, Dave, well before I knew her. And all three of us were peers in the banking industry. We were leading treasury divisions for banks. And so Dave introduced me to Amy. Amy then introduced me after I left. This was after I left banking. I met Amy and then found out that she and Dave were partners. And then they introduced me to Amy's son once I started my business and said he would be really interested in your work. And long story short, he is now working with me.
Oh my God.
As part of my team. But then she told me about this lovely lady who was at Instagram. And I'm like, Instagram, I'd love to talk to somebody at Instagram, especially somebody like that. And so in that kind of position, leading that kind of a strategy. And then it's been just great since.
Yeah, and I've really enjoyed getting to know you personally, and I can't wait for people to hear your story because you really are a mentor and inspiration for me. What you were able to achieve in your career and your life.
Mm.
That's why I really look up and we've kept our, sometimes we've fallen off for quarters, but generally we've we've kept our cadence and I want to start with kind of speaking of how impressive your background is, that really starts from your childhood.
Yeah.
And so we were talking before before the show, and I learned that you have such a powerful family legacy, that your father was a biologist for Johnson and Johnson at a time where there were not many Black
Mm.
people at the company, I'm sure, in those types of positions in the early '60s. Your family also was the first to integrate your neighborhood in New Jersey, which, um,
Yeah.
just to think about how that was not that long ago. How did this legacy, particularly your father's influence, set you up for success?
Can I say one more before I answer that? I want to say one
Please.
more thing about us. The thing I loved about us and what you will find when you start talking with people is how we connected over so many commonalities in our life.
Yes.
So, and hopefully we'll get to talk about that a little bit too, about that a little bit more.
Yes.
But you're
Yes.
right. My father and family and my growing up, my childhood, I never knew what a foundation that would be for me, especially as I worked in corporate America in a conservative male industry in jobs where you would never see someone like me typically. But
Uh-huh.
you're right, my father, he worked at Johnson& and Johnson back in the late '50s, early '60s. He was a fearless man.
Ah.
He was raised by 2 strong aunts, one of whom, went to Bryn Mawr, and I'm sure she was a trailblazer back then at that school. But
Yeah.
he just taught us to claim our space. He was not apologetic about his being probably the only in his job, I would imagine, back at that time, about integrating a neighborhood right outside of Princeton, New Jersey. And I still, for the life of me, I wish he was here because being a banker, I would love to know how he got access to a mortgage back
Right.
then, given the mortgage laws and the discrimination in the laws. So I
Yeah.
wish I knew that whole
Right,
story.
with redlining and everything, and yeah, wow, incredible.
That's right. That's exactly right. But he made his way into that neighborhood. The neighborhood was not ready. None of the people on the street even spoke to us for
Mm,
such a long time.
wow.
And so we had to learn how to navigate being the onlys or later on even one of few in our schools and in our neighborhoods. So that was a pretty powerful lesson for me. The other thing that he was very strong about was and another lesson was running in diverse circles. So
Mm.
his circle of friends were so diverse from race, ethnicity, gender, gender identity back then, even
Wow.
socioeconomic diversity. He didn't, but he also, I remember their close friends being great professional blacks, and they were role models for us even back then. A lot of his friends, not all. Again, he ran in very diverse circles. That was an important lesson for me to carry into corporate America. And then education was non-negotiable. And my kids tell me, "Well, you raised us like that." So they'll say, "We just thought the first year of college was just grade 13."
Right.
And so that's
Love
that's
it.
exactly how it was. You were going to college. That was
Period.
non-negotiable. And then all of that helped me really navigate my way through corporate America.
Wow. What a just a beautiful story, and I know that none of that or a lot of that was not easy, but what
Yeah.
I find beautiful is just the through line of having to build that type of character and strength and, like, internal fortitude, like, your father teaching you, and your family have the strength of character and sense of self at that time during all of the civil
Yeah.
rights and all the
Yes.
unrest, and I can't even imagine, but how that sets you up almost perfectly to come in and be able to hold your own in the corporate arena.
And I gotta tell you, honestly, as a child, it was not easy.
Oh, I'm
It wasn't
sure.
easy at times sitting in the classroom by myself, being the
Mhm.
only, especially and we especially as you study things like slavery in history,
Oh
and how
gosh.
they were positioning it back in the books back then. Having to live through the '60s and all of the civil rights that happened back then. And by the way, he was totally involved in politics and civil rights in addition to working his job. He
Oh,
ran for
I'm sure.
city council in New Brunswick, in Somerset, New Jersey, won a council seat. So he was very vocal
Yeah.
both in politics and in personal life. So
Oh my
he was
gosh.
amazing. He had a big
Legendary. That's what
impact.
I just your dad was a legend, a local
He was.
legend.
We do say he was a legend because he was something else.
I love it, I love it, and you just made me think of a random memory that I can relate to, somewhat of being that only. So I took an AP history class in high school, and I was the only person, well, not necessarily person of color, but I was the only Black person in the class, and when we got to the paragraph, and I mean paragraph on slavery, everyone, like, turns around and looks at me, and the uncomfortable feeling of having to sit there and feel like you're the only representative and wanting to speak up because making the way they downplayed the sheer
Mm,
terror that
mm.
was chattel slavery. So I won't take us down that rabbit hole, but
No,
I remember that feeling and having to still try to hold my dignity.
can I share a story? But see, that's something else we had in common that I didn't even realize. So back in the '60s, and I went to Catholic school.
Oh,
And, the sister who taught us history would make us read the history book out loud. So she would assign certain people to read certain paragraphs, and I gotta tell you, I never as they were reading out loud the description of slavery back then, all I could think in my mind is, "That is not us.
no,
That is not
no.
how you need to only think of us.
Right,
There are other ways to think of us."
right.
But you're right, people would turn around and look at me, and I would just wanna just crawl under my
Yes.
seat, to
Yes.
the point where there were times when I knew that that chapter was gonna be read out loud, and I would pretend I was sick, try to stay home and pretend I was sick. Well, that
Uh,
didn't work.
right.
So, yeah,
I'm
yeah.
sure dad and mom weren't going for that.
No, you're going to school.
Yes. Oh my goodness.
Yeah, I know.
But it builds, at the end of the day, it
Builds
builds
character.
resilience, it builds character. Absolutely. So speaking of your wonderful parents, you chose a different career path than them. And so I'm curious, how did you get into the banking industry?
Oh my gosh. So that's another interesting story. So I went to Duke University, so
Oh,
for college,
congrats.
and I was a double major in sociology and econ. And I actually ended up getting married my sophomore year or before
Aw.
my sophomore year, right after my freshman year. And my first husband was a football player at Duke. Well,
Oh my
that got
gosh.
me into a work study job in the business office of the athletic department. So that was my work study job and how I worked my way through school. but the department rolled up to the vice president of business and finance for the university. And he would
Okay.
come through the athletic department fairly frequently, as you can imagine. Um, and he just became friends with me. He would
Aw.
stop in the business office, chat with me. Oh, and then he hired me into my first job after graduating into a business and finance training program for the university.
Wow.
Well, when my husband and I decided to move our then young family to Winston-Salem, North Carolina, where Wachovia Bank was headquartered back then, he said, I know a Duke alum in the HR department there, and he said, I'm going to call her. And he called her and told me, he said, we have somebody moving to your city. You need to interview her for a job and you need to hire her because she is good.
Oh my
And that's how I always thought. So when they took him up on that and they interviewed me, I told them I wanted to be in HR because that's what I thought I wanted to do.
yeah.
Long story short, they came back for an offer for the corporate banking training program. I knew nothing about corporate banking,
You're like, "What is that?"
but that was the beginning of a long career in corporate commercial banking where you just didn't see us, especially back then and even now, sadly. But I think back on that and I think a couple things. Number one, he was a sponsor to me,
Oh,
not just a mentor, but
absolutely.
a sponsor. He put his voice and said, hire her. She's good.
Uh-huh.
And they took him up on that. The second thing is don't just dismiss what comes before you as something that you may not want. Because I didn't know anything about corporate banking, in hindsight, I was an econ major. My very favorite course in econ was money in banking, which talked
Oh.
about how money moved through the banking system. And I tell you, corporate banking is exactly that.
Yeah.
And that my first job in banking was placed in an area called cash management. It's now
Oh god.
treasury, like
Yeah.
what Amy and Dave and
Yes.
I ran. My first job was a cash management consultant, going around the country advising companies how to improve their cash flow, how to move their money through the banking system quicker.
Mm. Oh my gosh. I
So I
so
always say I was the banker who never should have been a banker, but someone saw something in me because I didn't have accounting, I didn't have finance. All I had was economics as a major. That was it.
well, and you clearly had work ethic and were just a pleasant person as well. So a couple things that stand out about that story that I think people take for granted is you showed up, you were doing your job in the athletic department through the hard work that you put in there and being a delightful person, right? Because he wouldn't have connected with you. I tell people all the time relationships matter. When I
Oh,
am
you're
mentoring
so right.
people, when I am coaching people, relationships matter. And people, we'd like to think that we get hired because of what's on our resume. And clearly, in your case, you didn't have
That was
any
not the case.
banking on your resume. I always encourage people, especially when I'm doing career coaching and mentorship. Yes, qualifications and things on your resume matter, but what matters more than anything, and studies show this, people fortunately or unfortunately, they select people who they want to work with, who they see there's some sort of relationship that they've
Mhm.
built or some sort of chemistry or even similarities. That's where we see affinity bias pop in. But oftentimes that starts with you know someone, it's some sort of relationship. So I love that through this relationship that you built organically, you found this incredible sponsor who to your point, that's another thing, and we know coming from the DEI background, which we'll talk more about, that sponsorship matters more than mentorship. sponsorship matters. And lastly, a little thread that I want to pull on that example as well is how beautiful is it that the universe,
Oh,
God, fate,
yes.
right? Like this was a fated opportunity and you had the good sense and the open mind to step into your destiny, which to your point, like that wasn't what you had planned, but you
Not at
kept
all.
yourself open and look at the beautiful path that unfolded.
And I got to tell you, what you just said about relationships is one of the key things that talk to and talk about with people that I coach now professionally, that you've got to develop not just mentorship relationships, but sponsorship relationships. And
Mhm.
this is a lesson from my early childhood. Make them diverse as possible.
Yes.
Make the people you surround yourself with as diverse as possible. And that was critical to me. I think I was so fortunate throughout my whole career to pretty much have sponsors all along the way, not just in the door or out the door, but throughout my entire career. And people do business with people that they like.
Yeah,
And that's
absolutely.
whether you're in sales or whether you're selling yourself internally. So,
Yeah, so true. So true. So try, that's a whole other, let me not lecture to people, but some people are just grumpy and disagreeable. And so, and wonder why they're not getting opportunities. But we're going to
yeah,
leave that on the side. You,
I love that.
so,
Grumpy.
so this path, you stepped into this role at Wachovia. And of course, that led to, and I won't say of course, but now we know through all of your diligence, all of your hard work, you had an incredibly successful career. At one point, you were an executive vice president at First Horizon, which is super impressive. You've led large P&Ls at major banks, and for those who work in corporate, leading a profit
Yeah,
center is a big deal. And you don't see a lot of companies where women or people of color are in charge of
yeah.
P&Ls, so that's a big deal. You were on the commercial and treasury sides, as you mentioned, of the business, and you have many accolades. Too
I don't know
numerous
about
to
that.
name. You won some, pretty prestigious awards in your career. What are taking all of that
Yeah.
into consideration? What are some of the key milestones and related lessons that you've learned over your career?
I gotta tell you, I have so many stories
I'm
of
sure you do.
things that were great and things that were not so great throughout my career. So I guess the first thing I learned and really put into practice, well, there were several. One was don't be a lifer. Don't
Ooh, say
silo
more.
yourself. And if you want to be a leader in a company, you need to know different areas of the company. So, one of my
Mhm.
rules for myself was I'm not going to stay in a job more than 5 or 6 years. And then I'm going to move on to another job, another department, another position, get promoted, whatever, even a lateral move. So, know your
Yes.
company, know different areas of your company. And so I was fortunate in cash management, or now called treasury, but in cash management consulting. And one of the things I learned was I was a treasury consultant, but I worked with the person who controlled access to the client and the relationship. So
Mm.
I was their partner, but they were the key relationship manager. And they did the lending of the money, which is the true business of banking.
Mhm.
And one of the things that I proved when the bank first hired me is I had the ability to learn. If they surrounded me with the right stuff, I could learn the business of banking. And so but the highest paid roles were the relationship managers, the people who did the lending of the money.
Yeah.
And I would sit there on client visits and say, I can do that job. I would listen to the questions. I actually got the nerve to say, okay, I want that job. I
Good
want
for
that job and
you.
I'm going to figure out how to get there.
Mm,
So don't be a lifer and ask for what you want. So
yes.
about 6 years after being in cash management, and I would read their credit memos and their lending memos, and I'm like, I know I can do that. So when they offered me another job, which was to run the training programs for corporate banking,
Oh,
that was
wow.
going to take me out of a client facing role, and it also was not gonna get me to my next move, which was to lend money. So I negotiated with them. So that's my next lesson is negotiate for what you want. And so when
Mm,
they asked me to do that, I said, okay, I will do it for 3 years, but then I want to go back to customer facing and revenue generating, but I want to be a lender. I want to learn how to lend money. They
ooh.
honored that because they wanted me to do that job. So I negotiated what my move after the next move would be.
Oh,
So that's
wow.
another thing. Ask for what you want. I will also say that I negotiated my performance review. My very first performance review, I negotiated the rating on that review because I
Incredible.
was in a training class, a corporate banking training class that was full of MBAs, people who had master level accounting and finance degrees. I never even had taken an accounting or finance course. So as I went through the program and I was getting good ratings on the projects they were assigning to me, and I was learning, the person giving me my first performance review, he kept using the word, you know, everyone I talked to said you exceeded their expectations. You did a great job on, and so he kept using the word exceeded expectations.
Mm.
And I also knew because others were telling me what they got on as their rating. The MBA people, the people who had their MBAs, were getting exceeded expectations. And so when he turned around and gave me my performance review, I said, you said I was an exceeds expectation in the conversation, but you have meets expectations here. I said, "That's not the same thing." And he said, "Well, you didn't have an MBA or finance or accounting degree, so that's why." I said, "No." I said, I think the people who have already taken these master accounting core and finance courses that we took during this program, that was all review for them. They're the ones who should meet expectations because
Right.
they knew all this material before going in. I did not. And I had
Mm.
to learn it, and it took a long. I would sit sometimes in my closet at 3 o'clock in the morning so I didn't wake my family up just studying these accounting classes
Wow.
and the information to perform in these MBA level classes. And I said, so I'm not going to sign it until you change it to an exceeds expectation. And then I just was quiet.
I
I
love
didn't say another word, and the look on his face, so I just kinda wait, and then he finally changed it, and I said, that thank you, I'll sign it now." So,
oh
just
my
that's
gosh.
just a lesson for ask for what you want.
Oh my
I have
gosh.
so many stories around
I
asking for what I want from a salary standpoint to creating my own job. On a couple of occasions, I created my own job where I saw a gap in the market. That's how I did the specialty lending for the women and minority and small businesses. I created that job description and said, this is what I want to do. So just ask for what you want.
I you just gave a mini master class on
Well,
career success. So I hope for all the people listening and watching, go back and listen to this episode again, share it with friends, share it with your mentee. That was masterful. And just to pull on a couple things you said there, first of all, don't be a lifer. I love how you phrase that. That was always my instinct throughout my career. And I was in corporate just shy of 20 years. And back then, when you moved, particularly if you moved companies, they would call you a job hopper. And I got that almost like that was thrown around from colleagues or, oh, why are you job hopping? Or recruiters would kind of insinuate. But I've always had this fire and this passion to learn. Like I started getting itchy in like a year and a half, like max 2 years. I have to do something different. But following that instinct has led me to multiple industries. It has led me to understand multiple parts of a company, different size companies. So I think that is excellent advice for people to diversify your skills and have that breadth of knowledge. Like it's great to have depth and some people
Yeah.
value being a specialist. So not to say don't have a set of expertise or expert skills, but I found having breadth is what really helped me to grow my career. So I love that advice and that we share that instinct. And then the ask for what you want, like the absolute audacity. I love you told them, listen, I am not settling for this meets expectation. Like, are you talking to me?
Especially since he had used the word, "Well, you exceeded expect." He kept saying that throughout the
Yeah.
discussion, and so I was shocked when I saw the meats on there. It did not make sense to me.
Yes. So to have the courage to call that out, and you did it diplomatically, but you backed it up with facts. You persuasively made your case. And I think sometimes, especially as women and people of color, we are scared to stand up for ourselves for
Yeah,
good reason because we're made to feel that you are even lucky to be here. So, how dare you even ask for more? But when we know the value that we bring or have brought, I think it's important, it's crucial to make the case for yourself. And even the asking for what you want in a career sense, I relate to that. I've done similar throughout my career. Most recently, when I was leaving Meta in my last like year and a half, I had joined them in 2020 to head up DEI for Instagram. And then that I was then promoted into the being the DEI lead for what they called family of apps. So that's all of the platforms, Instagram, Facebook, WhatsApp, etc. But things have started to shift and the way the world was looking
yeah,
at DEI, the way we were doing DEI internally was shifting. Long story short, I again was feeling like I need another challenge. I'm not able to fully make impact in this role. And so I talked to my leadership team and things aligned where someone was going on leave. And I ended up stepping into an interim director role for our talent management, our diversity talent management. And that gave me another viewpoint of
fantastic.
DEI and the systems and processes, the company wide systems and processes related to DEI. So, had I not been honest, and I was even honest enough to say that I may look outside, which some people think is crazy. But again, I'm pretty transparent when I am ready for a change and I am not happy in the role that I'm in. I've always taken the tact to be as honest as possible with my leadership team and give them the opportunity
Yeah.
to come forth with something new. And if they don't, then I'm moving on.
You know what you said too, what I love about what you said is that you took control of your career. You didn't stay and let people make decisions for you. You, number 1, proved the ability to learn, your ability to execute, your ability to ask for what you want, and
Yes.
so I think all of that is fabulous. You know what's interesting when you talk about saying, "I may even look outside," There's nothing wrong. I don't think there's anything wrong with saying that if you're talking to a trusted leader or advisor
Mhm.
or sponsor. Those are what you should be able to have honest conversations with
Yes.
them. I'll tell you another story about asking. This was kind of a subtle ask for what I want. And again, it was early in my career. I accidentally found out that two young men that had joined our department, and they again had MBAs. I did not, but I was more senior because I'd been in the department for about 3 years by then. And they asked me to train those two individuals. Well, long story short, I found out accidentally through someone else that they were getting paid more than me. And I'm like, wait a minute, they're just learning the job. I know they have MBAs, but I know the job and I'm
Right.
teaching them.
Yes.
So I talked to my husband and decided, okay, I'm not going to stay for this salary. So
Good
I
for
went
you.
out and I had somebody contacting me from another bank. I negotiated a job with them and they gave me an offer actually. And so I took that offer to my leader and I said, "I'm sorry, this money is too good to pass up. I'm
Mhm.
I'm going to have to resign." But I had an offer in hand, so I
Mm.
was not telling a story.
Right, which some people try
And
that tact, and that
that
might
yeah, and
blow up
that
in
is
your face.
absolutely wrong. You should
Yes.
never do that.
Yes.
But what it did for me is they wanted me to stay so bad, they countered and gave me the money that I needed, and I ended up staying.
I love
So,
that.
you've gotta think about, how do I get what I need? What's the right way to get what I need,
Mhm.
or the right way to ask for what I need?
Absolutely. It's strategic. I tell people, and especially we can see in this day and age, what I the writing on the wall for the power dynamic shifting from employers have always had outsized power, of course, but there was a time that they did care about their employees, a time when there were pensions and other retirement products, and
Yeah,
they would actually grow you through your career. There were these defined career tracks. No more. I think we're in the age of free agency. I looked at when I was early in my career, my first corporate job was at Mervyn's, this retail store, and I watched them. This was during the 2008 recession, 2008, 2009. And I watched them lay off people who had been with the company their entire
mm.
career, 30, 40 years of service. And I was working in HR, so I had to do those
Oh,
notifications.
that's
And
hard.
oh, it was
That is
heartbreaking. It was
hard.
heartbreaking to have to help and watch people clean out their entire life. Like they had defined themselves by working at Mervyn's. It was heartbreaking, but it sparked something in me that I said, okay, I have to take responsibility for my career. And maybe that's where how you said that mentality of me taking the lead because I didn't want to have the rug pulled out from under me.
There you go.
And so I encourage people that it's a strategy. They are paying you to do a job and it's a give and take. So as long as your company is paying you, paying you what you're worth, as long as they are pouring into you with opportunities and learning and all the things, then that's an equal transaction. The minute that that stops happening, I would feel 0 loyalty, and this is just my opinion, y'all.
That's
I would feel
exactly.
0 loyalty because companies no longer have blind loyalty and fidelity to their employees. It is a transaction.
And I'll tell you, the reason why most people leave companies, it's 2 reasons. One is culture, the culture of the company. The other is their leader. More
Mm.
often than not, it's their direct leader not doing those things for them.
Yes.
What I
Yes.
will also say, though, is that leaders aren't mind readers.
Correct.
They're not gonna intuitively
Right,
some of
but
them
most
do
won't.
very well, but a lot of them don't. So if you're not having those conversations, at least monthly or quarterly with your
Yes.
leader and telling them what's working, what's not, what you need more of, what you want more of, how you can contribute more, what gaps you see that maybe you can fill. If you're not having development conversations and future forward conversations with your leader, they're probably in the dark about some things. And
So
so
true.
establish that kind of a relationship. I will share with you an example. As I moved up the ranks, I think the challenges being a woman and a woman of color became tougher and tougher. So I'll share
Absolutely.
another story about asking for what I want. And I call this one Be Willing to Fire Your Top Performer.
Ooh.
So when I was running a commercial team, and I was asked to run that team 3 times. I turned it down twice, but then the 3rd time, the regional exec, came to me and said, "No, we really want you to lead that team."
They
And it
got
was
you
a
on the
team I had been on, and it was a dysfunctional team, and I did not want to go back to that team even as a leader, but I did. And the 2 gentlemen who were running the team were furious that I was put over
Oh
the team,
gosh.
and one of them weren't.
Mm.
If there was gonna be one person leading the team, they thought it should be one of the 2 of them.
Mhm.
They were
Mhm.
both co-leads. That's not a good situation.
I It
Co-leaders, I
never
don't think
is.
ever work.
They don't. Yeah, speaking from having coached many teams and especially helping from an HR perspective, co-leads, not a
Yeah,
great
it
model.
it doesn't in my
Continue.
opinion, my humble
No,
opinion.
you're, and I'll chime in on my opinion too. It's not a good situation.
So I
Continue.
thought I would smooth over how they were, I was understanding how they felt, and so I took both of them to lunch to try to, level set the
Yeah.
relationship because I knew both of them pretty well.
Yeah.
One of them looked at me over lunch and he said, "I will never work for you. I hate you." He used the word
Oh,
hate. I was floored.
wow.
But I remained calm and let him talk, and we got through lunch. He ended up leaving. That was fine.
Yeah,
The
right.
other one remained, but continued to do whatever he could to undermine me.
Mm.
And about 3 months in, I remember sitting in my job saying, "I hate this job. This is not work." And then I thought, "You better get control because 'cause you're the leader." And
Mhm.
your whole team is watching how you maneuver this because they know what's going on. And
Yes.
so I went to my leader, and let me back up and say this guy was the top one of the top performers in the bank at
Oh
that time,
gosh.
in the entire footprint of the bank. And I
Wow.
had him on my team. He had the most significant customers in his portfolio, and he was a great banker. I will say he was a
Mm.
great banker. But I went to my boss and I said, "I've gotta fire him. He is not respecting my leadership. He's
Mm.
not coming to my meetings. He's not turning in his reports. His team is not participating because he led a subgroup of the team."
Mm.
My boss swallowed hard, looked at me, and he said, "I've got your back on this. You do what you need to do." But I knew he was nervous as all get out
Oh, I'm
if I went, yeah,
sure.
because that would have been a huge hole in the team that we would have had to recover from. But I went and sat down and talked to this gentleman. I showed up unexpectedly at his office. He was in another location in the city, and I closed the door. And I just said, "You know what? You are a great banker. You're the best banker on the team, no doubt. You know more than I do about banking. You've been doing it longer." And I said, "You know, we could work really well together. We could learn a lot from each other. And my number one goal is for us to do that. But if we cannot find a way to do that, one of us won't be here real soon. And I'll tell you, I'll be the one that will be left. You will not."
Ooh. Oh my
He
goodness.
broke down and cried. He actually literally broke down and cried and said, "You've got to help me." I'll tell you, from then on, we had a great relationship. He included me in things. He introduced me to his customers and it ended up but I had to have the courage to have that conversation.
Yeah.
And I've had other situations as I moved up higher in banking where I've had to address people who did not respect me as a leader.
Oh my goodness. That is just an incredible story that illustrates how much grace, leadership, courage you had to have under fire. And for something that wasn't even it was based on whatever reasons they had, and we know there it sounds like there was some bias, either overt or unconscious, why they didn't wanna work for you as a Black woman. And it's unfortunate being a, Black woman leader myself, certainly, have faced those experiences as well, not to that, extreme of a degree, but the undermining, all of that, the backstabbing, the different things, are people questioning my decisions, trying to go around me, trying to go above me, and you're just there to do a job and do a job well and try to be the best that you can be for yourself and your team. And so I love that you had the support of your leader. That tells a lot about how strong of a leader you were, that your leader was willing to go to bat for you against the top performer. You did something that I don't think many people would have had the courage to do. You could have just, and I've seen it being an HR professional, I get a chance to peek behind the curtain and be
Yeah.
in these conversations around performance and these annual conversations around, who's getting promoted, who's getting put on a PIP or a performance improvement plan. And I can't tell you how many times I've seen leaders, against my advice, just take the quote unquote easy route and just put somebody on the list to be laid off, or just try to put somebody on a PIP without having that conversation with them,
Oh,
without
yeah.
having the decency and the respect for the person to have a heart to heart conversation. So kudos to you and how that turned that situation around by doing that.
And I gotta tell you, I believe in this because we would want this to be the case for us. Seek first to understand. And what
Mhm.
I had to understand, and the reason why I went in first and started the conversation with, I want us to work together. I think we'd be a great team. You're the best banker. I also had to understand that his ego was hurt
Yes.
because he
Yes.
was the best banker on the team.
Right.
But just because you're the best producer doesn't mean you'll be the best leader.
Say
And
that.
so but we do have to understand he also had some personal issues going
Mhm.
on in his
Mhm.
life that I knew about. And so I knew that it was a tough time for him, and I had to understand that, but I also had to hopefully gain his respect of me as his leader. And
I love
so,
that.
yeah,
Just
have the
grace.
courage to have a conversation.
Courage, grace, and humility, and just it's traits that I think are non-negotiable for leaders, and empathy. Clearly, you had empathy because the way that he and his colleague treated you at lunch, you could have put all of them on a pip and threw them out the door. Like,
That's right.
you they could have all been gone.
Seek first to understand. Everybody should do that.
I love it, I love it. So aside from dealing with these knuckleheads and all the other mess that you were dealing with in your career, you also were a wife and a mom. And I know that, like me, sadly, you lost your husband several years ago. So that just adds another layer of just grief. And again, being also a fellow widow, there are no words
Mm.
to properly explain that experience. And so I was just curious to hear from your perspective. How did you overcome that loss and keep moving forward?
That was one of the hardest things I've ever done in my life, for
Mm,
sure.
yeah.
Um, eh, Ted, he was my second husband. My girl's dad, was my first husband, and then I have 4 children. So I have 3 girls and then a boy. My son, Ted was his dad, but my girls, I mean, Ted and my girls got so close that they
Mm.
think of him as their dad.
Oh, it's
And
beautiful.
so I will tell you, Ted was like the total opposite of me. I was this, serious professional. My career, I was raising these 3 girls. Ted was the opposite. If he could have taken us all to Jamaica and him been a Rastaman, and just hang out in the islands. That's what his preference would. But I failed, and I was like, no, I got these 3 girls to raise. It's
Yeah.
not going to be that. But anyway, long story short, he taught us how to have fun in
Oh.
life, and I love the name of your podcast, Blissful Life, because that's what I felt like we really had when Ted came into
Mm.
our lives. And then we added Teddy into the mix, so a
Aw.
boy among, the 3
All the
girls. So the
girls,
whole thing was it was a good story. But unfortunately, he did pass away. Teddy was
Sorry.
young then. He was, I guess, like, going into high school or his first year of high school. He was, like, 15 years
Oh,
old.
wow.
The
Wow.
girls were grown because there's 11 years difference between Teddy and my youngest daughter. So, they were either in college or grown, beyond college. Only way I got through that was, number 1, my girls were tremendous support for
I
me.
bet.
They surrounded me. They helped me with Teddy whenever I needed help with Teddy because, I still had a job and I had to travel after
Yeah.
he passed away. But they helped me prepare for everything that was needed once when Ted was passing away,
Mm,
and afterwards. So that was one thing. My youngest daughter, even after she graduated from college, came back and lived with me for a while to help
mm.
with that.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
and then I will tell you, so it was my girls, even Teddy, even having Teddy there afterwards was a blessing to me, so I
Yes.
wasn't by myself. My friends, there your circle of friends will surround you especially during times like that. My
Yes.
family, my entire Jersey family,
Mm,
my entire family, and then my work family. That's again
yes.
establishing those relationships at work. They gave me the grace I needed and the time and space I needed to get myself together after the funeral, after all of that. But I will tell you the number one thing was my faith. I
Yeah,
could
yeah.
not have made it through without my faith, and I believe that God guided me through all of that.
Mm,
And I
I
can
know.
remember a couple of years, or the year that Teddy went away to college, and I was truly by myself at that point. And I had never lived by
Yeah.
myself before. Never, ever, ever. I always had, you know, my family or husband or
Yeah.
kids. I
Yeah.
had never ever lived by myself. And when Teddy left the house and after we dropped him off at college, I came back to that house. I guess I had not grieved like
Yeah, I
I
can
I guess
relate.
that's when I realized I truly had not grieved his death because I was so into keeping things going. I
Yes.
actually fell on my knees and raised my
Mm,
hand and said, "God, I need your help."
mm.
And I
Mm,
just remember that being a defining moment for me and what I really needed to make sure that I was grieving and asking God for the help I needed to get through it. My mother passed
mm,
away very young when I was a child. My father passed
oh,
away when I was in college.
wow.
There was nothing that compared to my husband passing away in terms of
I
a
ooh,
challenging situation. So and I know we connected over that. Your story
yeah.
is even more heartbreaking to me than,
Mm,
it's all heartbreaking,
it
but yours was just
is.
heartbreaking to me when you shared.
Oh, thank you. And I'm just listening. Just thank you so much for sharing your story with me and with the audience. And that is definitely one of the commonalities that we connected over. And
Yeah,
to your point, there is nothing like I hadn't lost parents before, I've lost grandparents, but nothing could have prepared me for the
yeah,
magnitude of the loss of my husband. It sounds like our sons were the same age. My son was 15 when his father
right, yeah,
died. Similarly, it was friends, it was my work family that came and gave me so much support, and I actually took 3 months off at the urging. My, one of my bosses at the
mm,
time encouraged me to take all the time that I needed. Otherwise, I would have been a crazy person and just went back to work and tried to, 'cause you just become used to trying to work
yes,
and hold it all together, and, I'm so, so grateful to this day at his prompting to take more time.
that's
Um
awesome.
yeah, because that gave me the opportunity to really be with myself and examine the feelings and let them come up, and of course, it's a journey, like, I didn't
Oh,
heal in that
yeah,
3 months, like, it took concerted effort and surrender, so I love how you said just surrendering to God, surrendering to the process. It took, more than a year, and sometimes the grief still comes up, 4 years later, um and I think there will always be a part of me that grieves the loss of my husband, but I'm so grateful that I had the courage to keep going. And I'm grateful that you had the courage to keep going for your family and for the people that you now serve in the world. So,
yeah,
wow.
we'll have to talk about even now coping strategies because it never leaves the grief never totally leaves you. You
No.
learn
Mm,
to navigate and to manage the grief better. But
yes.
at some point we'll even pick up on that conversation because
Yeah,
that's
yeah, I would love to.
important.
I would love to talk
Important to
about that.
share. Yeah.
Yeah, 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 yeah. And even the conversation, and maybe we'll even have to have you back, and because the conversation, even moving on and finding new love, which I know both of us have done. So that's a whole other can of worms, as
Oh
they say.
yes.
That's a whole other thing.
That's a whole nother learning
That
experience.
is, that is. So
But you learn by you keep growing and learning. You
yes,
learn as
yeah,
you grow as you learn is
that's
what I'm
it.
trying to say.
That's
So,
it,
yeah.
that's it. So, keeping on this theme of family, you mentioned that you have 4 amazing children, and now you're in a new phase of
Oh,
motherhood,
yeah.
mothering adult children and being a grandmother. So, what do you enjoy most about this phase of life or parenting?
Well, and let me also say I have an amazing stepdaughter too.
Ah,
She
yes.
is awesome, awesome. She's a New York Times best-selling author twice.
Oh
So,
my
well, yeah,
gosh,
but so I
wow.
include she is part of the family.
Oh,
Um,
amazing.
but yes, but I don't think I'm parenting my adult kids. I think they are parenting me now. I think it's role
It's
reversal.
role reversal.
That's exactly right. And what's that movie that's out now with,
Mm.
what is it where the mother and the daughter change roles?
Oh, like the shift
Freaky
or, Freaky
Friday or
Friday, yeah, yeah,
something like that.
yeah.
Yes, yes. I think that's what's happened is my kids now parent me. But it is the best phase of parenthood, I think. My kids are my best friends, and now my grandkids are becoming my best friends because 'cause they're getting
Aw.
older and they can, converse with you like
Yeah.
many adults. So they are awesome.
Mm.
But I will tell you, it is so true. Number one, I think my kids are I think they're the funniest people on the planet.
Love it.
And the group text, they just keep me rolling in the group text. So and I'm biased, but I do think
Right.
my kids are very funny. What I have
Aw.
learned in this season of life is that as I watch my children who have children parent, because times are
Mm.
different.
Oh gosh,
Times are
yes.
so different from when
Yeah.
I was growing up. um, they are better parents than I ever was.
Oh,
And
wow.
I tell them that all the time. They don't understand what I'm seeing, that I think they're
Mm.
doing so much better than I ever did when as they are parenting their kids. And it's so true that I think they're more patient than, everything was, come on, let's go,
Ex
everybody out the door. Come on, we're late, we're late, we're late. They are more patient. I was one that would say, "I don't know what you're fussing about. It's not
ex
that bad. It's just
right.
not that bad." Or I would say, as my father would say, "Do you wanna handle it or do you want me to handle it?"
Right,
And so that
right.
always was the answer to that was, "No, I better handle it myself. I
Mhm.
don't want him." When he got involved in the mix, it got messy. But I was always trying to convince them that, you know, just keep moving, don't let
Yes.
anything bother you, just keep on going.
Yes.
And
Yes.
instead of stopping, I watch as they talk to their kids and relate to the emotions,
Yes.
let them have their
Let them even have
emotions.
emotions instead of "Stop crying or Imma give you something to cry about."
That's right, that's exactly right, and so they coach me now.
Mm.
One of my favorite volunteer activities is at the Boys and Girls Club, and I'm not on the
Aw.
board. I just go spend time every week with those young children, and I love the
Oh,
kindergarten through 2nd
that's
graders
so
because they will
cute.
say anything.
Yes.
But they also, especially the young boys, are so competitive with each other. So if they lose and they start crying, I was always saying, "Oh, come on, stop crying. It's not that bad. Just get in there and do it again." So my kids are coaching me as to how to allow children now to have emotions and to talk
Yeah.
them through them.
Yeah.
So I say all that to say
Ah.
they parent me. I see that they are actually better parents than I was. But I also know too that, they will say to me things like, "Mom, did you hear how you said that? Did you have to say it that way?" Or listen to yourself as you say things or think before, because I
I
speak
just
pretty
yeah, you're
candidly
direct.
and
Yeah.
sometimes I don't check before I speak. And so they are teaching me how to do that even better. What I will say though is at work, I do talk with my team and have always talked with my teams more supportively maybe than I talk with my so there is a difference between the work me and the home me. So
Yeah.
they're
Yeah.
teaching me how to be more like the work me at home
Yeah.
when I'm dealing with people and with kids. So they're
I
pretty cool.
I love hearing that you have just the openness to see it from a different perspective
Oh,
or
yeah.
just new lens on parenting because you're right, generations, certainly my parents and generations before, that was the way of the world. Like you had to suck it up and keep moving, especially thinking about how we started this conversation. Everything that your family had to go through just to survive in society. I w we wouldn't even be here if all of our ancestors crumbled and internalized everything. Now we know, of course, that internalized trauma brought it has some negative effects. So I'm glad that current generations and future are now realizing that yes,
Yes.
while the positive of sucking it up was that you did keep moving forward, the negative is that you suppressed, and that created all kinds of disease and dysfunction in our families and our communities. So how can we do better? And
Yes.
I often hear people of older generations say, "Oh, these kids are too soft and the da 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 da." So I love how you're looking at it from the perspective like, no, like they're finding their emotions. They're like, that's a positive thing.
You've got to let them deal with their emotions. They don't have to stay in a negative emotion,
Yes.
but they need to
Yes.
realize they're human and that is human to have those emotions.
Yes.
But then you have to help them manage through that and out of it.
Yes.
And
Oh, I
so
love that.
and they also you also have to let them go through challenges because
Mhm.
they won't learn unless they have to start dealing early with tough situations.
Oh
So
gosh,
it's a
yes.
combination of the soft parenting versus no step up and learn the lessons too.
Oh, yeah, and this new generation, that's so cool that you're spending time with the babies because
Oh my,
they're, like, just wise beyond their years, I found. I have a stepdaughter, I call her my bonus daughter, because my fiancé and I were getting married in October, and so I have a
congratulations.
Thank
That's awesome.
you, thank you. So, I have a beautiful 9-year-old bonus daughter, and we learn from her all the time, just the way that she looks at the world and, just her
Yes.
beautiful spirit. So, that gives me hope when I look at how wacky the world is. I'm like, "These babies are gonna save us because we
I
we
agree. I can't wait for the next generation to take over.
like they have more just the way they look at the world and the optimism and the care and the expressiveness of their identity, their feelings. I just think it's going to bring us to a place where we are more human and more in touch with ourselves
Oh,
and
yeah.
building communities in a way that we haven't in the past. So
That is so true. I love working. That is my joy is spending time with my grandkids especially, but then with other younger children. And if you wanna laugh, just spend time with children. And laughter is a very healthy thing for your life. So if
it's
you want
yes.
a healthy life, spend time with children.
Yes, I agree, I agree. They said laughter is medicine, I believe that.
I
So
often tell my kids that, I don't wanna go to an old person home. Put me in a childcare center if you're gonna put me
yeah,
somewhere for in my old age, because I need to laugh and have fun.
exactly. Oh, I love that. I love it. Okay, so you're in a new phase of your career as well. So aside from graduating to a new level of parenting, you are semi-retired. And I
Yeah,
say we can maybe say semi in air quotes because I know you shared with me.
because 'cause I'm actually officially retired from banking. Right, right, right.
Yeah. But you're also still working part-time and coaching and you do both coaching and inclusive leadership consulting, having your own practice. What's something surprising you've learned through this venture now that you've stepped out of the corporate arena into being an entrepreneur?
So, I used to do business with business owners. My whole career was a banker and running banking teams was dealing with commercial and corporate clients. And always used to just marvel at what it took to run a business. And I always convinced myself there is no way I could ever do that. That is way too much work for me. Well, and now look at me, I'm running a business and it's just as hard as it looked to be. So that's the first
Yes.
lesson that I learned. But I also learned how rewarding it is when you
Mhm.
feel like you are helping others, whether it's the one-on-one coaching that I do, or whether it's working with a team of leaders to improve leadership strategies and talent strategies in their companies. And so that's been a lot of fun. I've also learned, though, that I miss my executive assistant
Yeah.
dearly, 'cause I hate doing administrative work.
Oh,
I hate doing the work it takes outside of running the meeting
same.
or putting together the strategies. So I was talking with her last week and just telling her how much I miss her. I wish she was here with me.
Yes,
So
yes.
so I've also learned that about running a business, but it's actually been a lot of fun. I don't do it try not to make it a full-time venture,
Yeah,
so I just take on projects with from people that refer projects to me that I know, that I trust, that I think are great leaders, or people that, say, "I'd love for you to do this." So I'm pretty selective at what
good,
I do, just to kind
good.
of keep it as I don't wanna work like I used to, 50
Yeah.
plus hours a week. No, I don't not as I'm retired.
Right, right. And making it still joyful,
Yeah,
and like you said, I love that you're being selective with the clients and the projects, and that way you can fill your cup by helping people, doing it with people you enjoy, and still
yeah.
have time to be with your grandkids and the
Yes.
kids that you volunteer with and all the things. So, as part of your business, I know that you have a focus on inclusive leadership, which means you continue to have a pulse on DEI. And as you were talking about in a previous example, you not only do you have a pulse on DEI from the work, but you have the real life battle scars of rising up the ranks as a Black woman executive in an industry where there weren't, many women and people of color in leadership. What's your take on the current
Mm,
state of DEI? It's been in flux over the last, I would say, at least year or two. So just
yeah.
curious, kind of your take on the work and where you see it going.
That's a great question, Regina, and I'd love to hear your take too
Yeah,
as I share mine. And one thing I didn't share was my very last job in banking was to lead a DEI strategy. I didn't call it that. I called it affinity strategy, because I knew what the DEI label was in some people's eyes even back then, and
yeah,
that was about 10 years ago. Um, and so, that's another job I negotiated when they asked me to step out of being head of treasury and help the president of the bank lead with a diversity strategy. We were already in HR was already running the strategy,
mhm.
but they knew they needed to do something different. And so I negotiated that. I said, I'm not going to do the traditional stuff, because it doesn't work. It's not
Right.
getting results. And so I created what that job was to be. I wanted it to be run like a business, to really get results, both for on the talent side in terms of showing that we're moving more diverse talent up the leadership ladder, and across lines of businesses where there was not much diversity. So we tracked our results. That was one thing we did differently. We actually track results by leader. The
Good.
other thing that we did differently, as I said, it's gonna generate some revenue. So we're gonna find gaps in the market, and we're gonna close those gaps, and
Ooh.
we're gonna bring revenue in through these strategies.
Oh, I love
And
it.
I track those results as well. Fast forward, and I call that the job I never wanted, but I took, and I didn't want that job because I loved, again, being in client-facing revenue
Yeah, yeah.
generating roles and being over product and sales teams. But I also knew, and the CEO of the company, Actually, I asked him, "So why do you need for me to do this? We're doing all the traditional stuff. Why
Right.
do you need?" And he said, "This could be your legacy." So that's
Ooh.
another recommendation I would make to folks is create your work legacy, create your
Wow.
leadership legacy.
Mm.
And I feel like that ended up being the job that was most rewarding to me when I look back at our
Aw,
results,
I love it.
for talent and for the clients. What I will say about the current state now is that it is disappointing to
Yeah.
me how how it's untrue. The things that are being said about diversity, equity, and inclusion are not true for the most part. What I will say is I do agree with some critics that not just right now, but even in the past, have said that DEI strategies or consultants have been more performative than results oriented.
Yes.
And that's
Yes.
actually one reason why I did not wanna take that job is because I
Right.
knew for years companies were saying they were caring about these issues, but they really weren't showing results. They weren't diversifying their leadership teams. They weren't
No.
giving opportunities or access into areas that were higher income earning areas. They weren't doing that.
Yep.
And so I do think some of the traditional things that happen in DEI are more performative. They might be foundational, you might have to start there, but you've gotta move into getting results, not just doing
Yes.
traditional DEI strategy. And so I will say I agree with critics on that piece of it. What I will say about the current environment is that I do think there are untruths being told, and when
Absolutely.
you look at who's saying what's not happening or what shouldn't happen or what they're gonna crack down on, they ought to turn the mirror around and
Right.
see that they're doing the exact same things with either the people they're putting in positions or
Yes.
how they select what
Yes.
they're doing. They're doing the exact same things that they're accusing others of. They're just doing it with, they're
Yeah.
proving it by hiring less diverse, less
I was
qualified
gonna say
people.
less qualified. Yes.
So there
In
you
most
go. I
cases,
said
yes.
it, and
Yeah.
that is what I believe. What I
I
think
yeah.
longer term companies need to consider doing is administrations and people will come and go. Your strategy for inclusiveness, for equity, for diversity needs to be more long term looking, needs to address systems and processes and practices, not necessarily people. But if
Yes.
the people aren't performing within those changes, the right changes, and the unbiased practices and processes for recruiting, for hiring, for promotions, for terminations, if they aren't performing within systems that you create that are really to the benefit of all talent, not just selective talent, then you need to have, like I had, a courageous conversation with those who aren't on the train. Give them a chance to get on the train,
Yeah.
but then if they don't, they might have to go.
Yeah. Yeah. I so very well said. I don't disagree with a single thing that you said in terms of how you characterize this I like to describe there's been a deliberate, malicious, in some cases, attempt to discredit DEI because we know that the pendulum has been swinging towards more opportunities, more equity, and that threatens the people who, don't want to necessarily open up certain levels of opportunities or want to have to even think about, being more diverse or inclusive. They are just used to operating in the old ways, and that's comfortable for them. And what do you mean I have to now consider, I can't say this, or which to me those are all I think the examples that are given around the kind of those are culture war conversations. I think people are using very inflammatory examples to try to pit people against each other, which is really unfortunate. But to your point, a lot of it, I think what happened in 2020 in particular, in response to the murder of George Floyd, while it was good to have more eyeballs and more participation on DEI, there was a lot of performative. I think that's a
Yes.
I think that is a very fair critique. Even questioning, and I was interviewed about this, maybe last year, and I said, I think that it is a fair critique if you're doing it genuinely to ask what are the results. Let's look at the metrics. I think that's a fair question. That in
Yes.
HR and DEI, we've always wanted to say we wanted to be treated, we want to have a seat at the table. And so we do have to run it like a business. And so I do think that's a fair question to ask. What are the metrics? What are the results? And where we're not seeing results, how do we make some adjustments so that it's not just a feel good effort? We actually are moving the needle towards the goals, even having goals. Even
Right.
having clear goals. That was one of the first things I did at Instagram, was to translate the company-wide goals into business unit goals that we could track and show progress toward and have a substantive strategy against. Um, so I do think that's a fair critique. And to your point, and this is something that I learned, I'm so grateful to have the experience at Instagram and Meta, looking at the systems and processes,
Yeah.
because that is what I saw. You can train on unconscious bias until you are blue in the face, and that is not going to make a lick of difference. And I'm sorry for people that that's what they do. It's not that it's not, from an education or awareness, that's a baseline. But to your point, people change. So you have to go after the systems. How do you mitigate or remove bias in every point of the system that a leader has a decision to make, is how I look at it.
That's exactly right. That's well put. Very well said. Data doesn't lie. You use data in business. Why not use it in inclusion strategy?
Mhm.
And and diversity means everybody.
Everybody.
Everybody, and that was one of the very first messages I said to our executive leadership team when I was when I was working with the president of the bank and put in that role. I stood up in a regional meeting of leaders, and their teams were also at this meeting. And my final words were, "We're gonna run this like a business, and inclusion means everyone.
Yes.
Diversity means everyone. Yes, even white men. White
Yes.
men need to be included in consideration. If you are running a branch in a market and it's staffed with all Black people and it's in an all Black market, that is not
It's not
diversity.
diverse.
That needs a diverse staff, just like staffing in high income, wealthy mainly white areas. You should not have all white bankers in that branch.
Oh, I
So we
love
need to
that
look
point,
at
Lynn.
where we are lacking diversity and see who is not included at the table there.
And that is the fundamental point. Thank you for bringing that point forward, because I think that's actually how diversity or DEI has been so easily co-opted, because we've allowed people to shift the narrative, and it's been for a long time. Even when diversity came in, it's diverse was considered, oh, that's a person of color or a woman.
Right.
It's
For a
like,
woman. That's
no.
exactly
And
right.
when I do teach workshops, because I do believe in educating people on the terms so we know what things mean, that is something that I always spend time defining what diversity and inclusion. And diverse is not a person. Diversity is difference amongst an array of people. And so to your point, somebody might look at and say, "Oh, that's an all black branch. That's diverse." It's
Yes,
like,
that's
no.
right. That's it. That's exactly right.
It's like, no, I mean, that's great that there's more people of color in a particular location, but it is not by definition that is not diverse and or inclusive. And so I love that point. And I think if as DEI practitioners or people just you don't even have to be a practitioner. If you care about inclusion and belonging, I think that's the work that needs to be taken forward in DEI is to think about how can you make an environment where everyone regardless of background, feels included and has a sense of belonging. There is countless research that shows that that's ultimately how a company is successful, particularly belonging. That's where I've been really anchoring and advising companies and strategists to think about that sense of belonging that we all want. That makes it a more enjoyable, but also more innovative in what we do in our day to day work. So
I think back on my career and I'll get, back to where I started. And I always said I was the banker who never should have been a banker, but someone saw something in me.
yes.
So, I say that to say they expanded their net in terms of who
Mhm.
they were recruiting. So I always tell leaders, see something in someone.
Yes.
You can teach them if they have the ability to learn, the proven ability to learn. They've
Yes.
proven that. They have a strong work ethic.
Yes.
They are a strong team player. And they are proactive at managing themselves and their career. If they've
Yes.
got those qualities, you can teach them whatever business you or whatever new skill you want them to have. So see something in someone, and
Uh,
those are the things you need to see.
absolutely. And I would throw one additional one positive attitude. I will
Yes,
take with the
attitude
things that you name and positive attitude. I would take that person
any day.
any day of the week. Oh, I love such a great conversation around DEI. Thank you so much for your insight and your wisdom there. As we round out this great conversation overall, when you look back at some of the struggles in your life or as new challenges arise, how do you maintain your bliss?
Honestly, I'll be very honest. I start every day connecting with my spiritual side and with my
Mm,
spiritual guider who is I'm a Christian, so it's God and Jesus Christ.
mm,
I read my
beautiful.
devotionals. I read the Bible. I and I journal. I'll write letters to God.
Ah,
And I write them in the spirit of gratitude no matter what is going on, whether it's something positive. Oh my gosh, yesterday this happened. Thank you so much for allowing that into our lives, or allowing me to do this, or for managing my schedule for me. Because I do know that he managed. I ask him to order my steps, and it's
that's it.
amazing how some days he really does take stuff off my calendar, put stuff on my
Mhm,
calendar, and it was
mhm.
the right thing. So I do a lot of gratitude journaling, whether it's writing a letter or writing down 10 things I'm grateful for. That is so uplifting to start my day.
Ugh.
And people will laugh at me because I typically don't, I will take meetings or go to meetings before 11 o'clock, but I typically will say 10, not before 10 or 11 o'clock do I want, because that is my Jesus time.
I love
And it
it.
really truly does help me to level set myself, understand that I'm not in control of
Mm,
everything, and that I need some help ordering my steps. That's how I do it.
That's wonderful. And I similarly have a routine where I spend time with myself in the morning and I tap into my spiritual connection and I meditate and I pray and just not only give thanks, but I pray for peace. I pray for areas of the world that are in conflict, that are in darkness.
Yes,
And I ask, God, source
absolutely.
creator, to send love, to send grace, to send peace to open up people's hearts. So um, I think that's such an important, whatever faith you are, or no faith
That's
at
right.
all for that
That's
matter.
right.
I do think there is something to be said about spending time with yourself and connecting with your own energy, your own sense of inner guidance and being, and then connecting with something greater than you.
And, we talked earlier about asking for what we want in our careers.
Hmm.
Also, because you made a great point when you're asking, or you're praying for people in the world who are suffering,
Hmm.
people in our communities who are suffering. So I also will say, ask your spiritual guide or your spiritual source for what you want and what you need and what the world needs. So ask and you shall receive.
Mm, so beautiful. Oh my goodness. Well, after this, Lynn, first of all, thank you so, so much for spending time with me, with us, your brilliance, your joy. You are a light in the world, and I know people are going to want to connect with you. They might be beating down your door for those time slots after 11 a.m. So, how how can people find and stay connected with you?
Well, they can email me at lwalker@connect-consulting.llc.com. So that's my email address. Or they can always find me on LinkedIn and message me like you and I did through
Yes.
LinkedIn. But I also want to say it's been a joy spending time with you. I miss our
Yes.
conversations when we skip a meeting or
I
skip
know.
a conversation, a catch up. So it's been a pleasure, and thanks to the audience too. And congratulations on your podcast. I think it's a great way to give back and to help others.
Thank you so much. And I will drop a link in this episode so people can get your links and connect with you. And I hope y'all enjoyed this episode as much as I did. I hope you will like and share and comment and just keep it flowing because there were some gems dropped by Lynn. So thank you again. And thank you,
Thank you.
everyone. Take
Yes. Thank
care.
you. Bye bye.